Welcome to the first episode of the Venn Diagram Podcast. Today we're going to be venning the measurements. Later this week, I'm going to be driving to Kansas, and the distance to Kansas from my house is 634 miles. So that's equivalent to 1,115,840 yards. So that's equivalent to 3,347,520 feet, which in turn is equivalent to 40,170,240 inches.
Oh, God.
Now, when I have that on my sheet here, the first numbers go 6, 1, 3, 4. And it goes from 634 to 1 million to 3 million to 40 million. So that's just really funny because you have to have such a specific number in order to get those to correlate. If you're trying to multiply or divide, if you're going from inches all the way down to divide, it's going to be inches divided by 12 is feet. And then feet divided by 3 would be yards. It just doesn't make any sense because you'd have to go number by number in order to find the correlation there. But on the other hand, with the metric system, that distance to Kansas from my house is 1,020.32 kilometers, which is equal to 1,020,320 meters. Makes a little bit more sense. We have a 1, 2, 3, and a 2. And that in turn is equivalent to 102,032,000 centimeters. So again, we have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 2. That's more like it. It's in tens. It makes sense in our brains because it's a 10. And I am in favor of the metric system.
Yeah, that confused me a lot when I came over.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what these were meaning. I had no feel for how long a feet or an inch was, or a foot, I guess. It was just a bit confusing. I got a feel for it after some time. How long a mile was after running one, and then how long an inch was. I think I actually looked it up, and it was about 2 centimeters.
Yep. An inch is like 2.2 centimeters or something.
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, I got kind of a feeling for it, but not quite. How much is a yard?
A yard is 3 feet, which is equivalent to 0.9144 meters. And I like that too. The fact that when you put a decimal on the metric system, you can convert it down super easily because 0.9144 meters is 91.44 centimeters. When you said running miles earlier, that reminded me. A couple days ago, I rode a mile on my unicycle, and I knew that I went a mile because I went around the track 4 times. We have our track in meters. So how does that? It's a 100-meter stretch, and then a curved 100 meters, and then another straight 100 meters, and then another curved 100 meters. Is it the same for you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was wondering where the Imperial system came from because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So where the heck did it come from? And in my research, I found that the Imperial system originated when people were building things in olden days because they didn't all have rulers because, you had to manufacture rulers and they didn't have machines. And so they used parts of their bodies. If you look at your thumb, and remember, people in, I'm doing air quotes here, olden days were smaller than us. So if you look at your thumb, it's about an inch long, right? And then if you hold out your arm, that's about 1, 2, 3 feet long. So that's about a yard. And if you look at your foot, it's about 12 inches long. And that's where they got all that. So I just don't understand why America still uses the Imperial system. Because do you remember when we went to NIST?
Yeah, that was cool.
Do you know what that stands for?
A National Institute of Standards and
Standards and Technology. I cheated. I just looked it up. But when we went to NIST, we saw an atomic clock, right? That atomic clock could I don't know if it was the clock that measured the laser, but there was definitely
Hmm?
something in that building that could measure the color of a laser up to 17 decimals, and it could do that accurately.
I don't know if that was Scott's. Scott had a kind of laser comm thing, and he said he used it to maybe it was measuring the light of a laser because he said they're shooting lasers at stars or planets to then look at the reflection and see how the light changed. So I think that is probably what he was doing.
Well, I know they could measure something up to 17 decimals accurately, right? So it's crazy to me that we can measure that accurately. And this was in America, in Boulder, Colorado. 17 decimals, yet we're still using the Imperial system. And the other interesting thing at NIST was the fact that they have both kilometers and miles. So, like, when you were pulling out of the parking lot, there was a sign that said miles per hour, and it was like 15 miles an hour. And then underneath that, it said, like, I think it was 34 kilometers per hour, because there are people from all over the world that work at NIST.
Yeah, the guy with who had the map with the adoption of the metric system.
Yeah, that was in the office.
Yeah, we should look if we could find that to kind of put it in the description. But it's pretty funny. It's a map of all countries who have adopted the metric system and the ones who have not. And the ones who have not are, I think, America and some small countries in Africa.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it right now. So all the countries that have the metric system are blue, and 95% of the countries are blue. And the only reason it's 95% is because America is ginormous. So America is red, and then there's a tiny country in Africa. I think it's Liberia. Don't quote me on that. And also, don't quote me on the 35 miles an hour. It's 24 kilometers per hour to 15 miles per hour. And then some country in Asia. I don't know what country that is.
It was funny because yeah, he told me the story that NIST tried to change all their stuff from the Imperial system to the metric system because it just was easier for like the programming and just for the visual stuff. I've made banana bread actually when we're recording the last episode or the introduction. And a thing that I found was most stuff or most recipes for banana bread in the internet or on the internet are actually in cups or are measured in cups, not in grams. And a problem occurred because I didn't know how to measure cups. And I first thought it was a weight measurement. So I just searched for conversion cups to grams. And I didn't find that. So then I was a bit confused. And because we don't have those cup measurement thingies that, for example, I think pretty much all American homes have.
Yep, we have like 3 sets in my home.
Yeah, and we didn't have those, so I I was confused because I didn't know how you want to measure stuff with volume because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if I want to I know weigh pasta by volume, how am I going to get 1 cup of pasta by leaving the pasta as a whole? I mean, I can't just crush the pasta and stuff it into the cup thing, and even
Because then
then,
it's not pasta.
yeah, then it's not pasta anymore.
The different things have different densities, and also they have different like shapes. So, for example, extra wide egg noodles are in a spiral, so you have a ton of space in there. A cup of extra wide egg noodles is 58 grams.
You can just crush them.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just crush it to fit it in because it's not extra wide egg noodles. Just
Extra small
it's just
egg
egg
noodles.
it's just egg noodle bits. So that's only 58 grams. Where orzo number 65 pasta, a cup of it, is 166 grams. More than 100 grams difference there. Now, I don't know how much that is, but I'm assuming it's a decent amount considering it's the same volume. A cup of flour is about 150 grams. It's hard to measure because I don't want to spill my flour everywhere, so I didn't get the thing all the way full. A cup of water is 200 grams, so and obviously I couldn't get that all the way full either, so it's probably a little bit more than that. And a cup of metal nuts, like nuts and bolts, right? That's 700 grams. Now, full disclosure, I didn't have a whole cup's worth of bolts, so I measured an eighth of a cup and I multiplied it by 8. So it's more or less 700 grams. And also, there are 16 ounces in a pound. So a pound is 2.2 kilograms. So the crazy thing about that is we use pounds and kilograms in America, which is super annoying. Like, I have a barbell in my garage right now, and it's 10 kilograms. So I have to convert that in my head because all of the weights that we put on the barbells are in pounds.
That is confusing.
I'm lucky that it's 10 kilograms, though, because that makes it super easy going back to kilometers and centimeters. You just multiply by 10, or by 10 by 2.2 is 22. So 22 pounds for that barbell. We also have 5Ks. Like, I've run I'm not a runner, I'm a swimmer, but we run 5Ks, and it's 3.1 miles. And on the course, it says you just passed, like there's little signs on it, and it says you just passed mile 1. Well, it's a 5K, not a 3.1 mile run, right?
Well, that is confusing. Do you know that clip of a woman complaining about how Arkansas is not named Arkansas and says, so I am Confucian.
So I am Confucian. Why is this one Kansas, but this one is not Arkansas? America, explain! Explain! What do you mean in Arkansas? What?
Going back real quick to the track, we can't run exactly a mile. We run a 1600 and a mile's 1609.34. So in the Olympics, they don't run a 1600, and obviously they don't run a 1609, but they do run a 1500, which is really interesting. But when you guys run, you can just run.
It's 25 laps a 10K. It's pretty boring. I wouldn't suggest running a 10K on the track.
Oh, absolutely not.
I did it once when I was trying to do a time trial, because you can't really have like a flat path to run your stuff. You always have hills here, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, it's good for training, but it's not good for running stuff like time trials.
This is another thing. Some pools in America are in yards and some are in meters. So you can have a 25-yard pool, you can have a 25-meter pool, and you can have a 50-meter pool. So that's another thing.
That'd be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you train in a 25-yard pool.
Yep.
And then you have to do your events in a 25-meter pool, that'd be pretty awful.
The funny thing is, it's like a 6 centimeter difference per yard. The conversions are so weird that you don't even convert them. So I've only ever swam in a 50-meter pool once. So I have one set of meter times and I have one set of yard times. So most of my times are in yards, but I have one meet that I did where I swam in a meter pool, and they don't even merge those two times. So you get a best time in a meter pool from all of your meters, or you get a best time in a yard pool from all of your yard competitions, if that makes sense.
Whoa, that'd be like running on a square track.
I guess.
Then having a square track time.
Or an incline track.
An incline track.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Like an oval up the hill and then down again.
For indoor track, it's like...
Yeah, they have bank.
Yeah, the whole thing is slanted so that you can maintain your speed around the corner. It's like a one of those cycling tracks. What's it called?
Track cycling.
Okay. And I'll put a link in the show notes to the SEC Indoor Track and Field Championships, February 28th, 2020, if you want to see more indoor track and field.
I mean, I don't know if there are even indoor tracks like somewhere near here, because it's just, why would you build an indoor track for, I mean, for competition, but there's usually not much competition apart from cross country here in Germany in the winter, or just that's what I've heard.
And if you think about it, it's the sizes of the countries too, because we have so much more diversity. I mean, America, it's a nation of immigrants. If you ask somebody where they're from in America, if you ask them where their ancestry is from, they will say, "Oh, I'm from this European country," or I'm South African, or I'm Chinese or something. Like, I mean, and you can say, "Oh yeah, I have German heritage," and you live in Germany. Nobody in America is from America. All right, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the change in value of currency.
Every currency changes depending on how much of value is backing up that currency. I mean, if there's a lot of industry and a lot of products being produced backing up the value of the euro, meaning they can be bought and can be sold with the euro, meaning European industry, it's going to rise. And that's how the financial crisis in 2007 actually worked, because banks were giving out loans to people at very low, cost interest payment. So more and more people could buy homes, but the problem was these banks, they sold papers to
Bonds. I think that's the word you're looking for. Like, they sold papers, and then you can buy a paper, and then you can sell it back later for more money.
Yeah, like that. And
yeah, that's a bond. Yep.
Based on the interest payment they were
Yep.
getting from the people who they lended money. And what then happened was the American industry was I think, producing so much more stuff than was actually getting bought. So what happened was the value of the dollar dropped, and with the drop of the dollar, the people just couldn't, afford paying back their interest payment or even finishing the house. And what then happened was these kind of papers that were sold got their kind of value, or what would happen was the people from the bank would come and sell the homes that the people couldn't pay off anymore. And because that was happening a lot, the price of homes drastically dropped.
Yeah.
Because there were so many homes on the market.
That makes sense. Yeah, because they couldn't keep up their home, so supply and demand, more supply and less demand equals the price drops, I think.
Yeah, and then those bonds that were sold dropped in price too, because you just couldn't get that much money from a house being sold at a lower price. So more people, seeing that the trend was going down, sold these bonds. So the price was going down even more. Yeah, and the thing is, then if those people who couldn't pay for those homes were going bankrupt, there's just no money for the banks to get, so they were going bankrupt, like the Lehman Brothers. But I'm not sure if that's the entire story around it. So I've just read it in some news articles. Maybe it's not totally correct what I've said, but I'm not a historian, or you don't have to be a historian to tell about stuff from 2007, but I wasn't that old when that happened, let's say that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't believe what people tell you on the internet, so better go out and read this stuff for yourself.
Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in books. I can just write a book about something and put it in on a shelf in the library, and then people read it and and quote it in whatever their school stuff.
I mean, I don't know if that's allowed, but
I mean, it won't happen because it's usually more checked if there's like you have to go to a what's that verlag publisher, right?
it's very hard to get published in the United States. At least I'm told.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, a publisher wouldn't want to publish something that's just wrong, so they'll obviously check your facts in what you're writing, so you can't just put out a fake book.
As long as you're not claiming the stuff you're saying is true.
Yeah, I mean just like faking news stories in the internet is, I think, a lot more easier than getting them published in a book or in a newspaper. I mean, not in a newspaper or in a news show. There was a thing, or kind of a small scandal with a German TV show called Wetten das. I think you probably don't know it.
Nope, definitely not.
All right, Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Yeah, so I'm kind of split on Fahrenheit and Celsius. Fahrenheit is a part of the Imperial system. However, I kind of like Fahrenheit. I hate to say this, but I kind of like it.
There's nothing wrong with Fahrenheit. I mean, it's just, I think just Celsius makes it kind of easier to, I mean, it's for water, obviously, but stuff freezes at 0 degrees and below, and I mean, water freezes, and water boils at 100 degrees Celsius and above. So that's kind of the thing that it's useful for, I guess.
I mean, obviously, I'm used to the Imperial system, but I don't like the Imperial system because it's not on a base 10. But Fahrenheit isn't like all wonky because there's only one unit you can have. It's Fahrenheit, and with Celsius, it's only one unit. It's the Celsius rather than feet and inches and yards and miles versus kilometers and centimeters and meters. Those make sense because they correlate, but Fahrenheit and Celsius don't, they're not based on anything else, so I don't think that there's anything wrong with Fahrenheit, even though I'm not a huge fan of the Imperial system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and it boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. As humans, we don't know what Fahrenheit feels like above like 140-ish degrees.
If you go into a sauna, and you'll get over pretty much. I don't know how much that is, but I think most saunas here are like from 70 degrees Celsius to 90.
Wow, that's hot.
Yeah, you shouldn't stay in there for like more than 5 minutes.